All right, welcome back to Conversations at Americans United for Life. We're joined today by Jor-El Godsey. Jor-El serves as president of Heartbeat International. He leads a staff dedicated to equipping, empowering, and encouraging thousands of leaders all across the United States and the world for their affiliated pregnancy, help centers, maternity homes, and adoption services. I am Tom Shakely from Americans United for Life, and we're thrilled to talk with Jor-El today. Jor-El, welcome.
Good to see you, Tom, as always.
Good to see you. Yeah, happy March for Life Week. Can you believe we're at, what is this, the 51st March?
That's right. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Of course, the weather is always an adventure, but you know what? It's more important that we get out, show our support for those who are facing unplanned pregnancies and who need something better out of Washington, frankly.
100%. Yeah. So let's get right into it. Jor-El, what led you to Heartbeat, and how is the work you're doing changing lives?
Well, I came out of actually, it's very personal. I experienced an abortion in my own past, was part of facilitating that, and then I stepped into a relationship with, frankly, with the God of the universe, and that really altered my path. And I began to understand that it was something that uh, His grace was sufficient for to really to kind of draw me to Him. And literally on a Sunday morning, I walked in, having had that experience in my past, encountered a message, a sermon actually, that was being preached, and what was said during that message was that abortion is not a political issue, not a social issue, but it's a gospel issue. And when I heard that, Tom, I was penetrated. Like
Mm,
it was as if I was the only one in the room that was hearing that, and I was penetrated for my own participation in that act, but also for the reality of what it meant to the God of the universe, who is our creator, and also what it meant for our country. And so we literally left our little church. We left that service that morning and went and picketed an abortion doctor. Then I found myself doing the next thing I knew, which was someone else presented to me, and basically peacefully protesting in front of an abortion clinic. And it was there that I got arrested, and then I was in jail for the weekend. And while we were in jail, someone mentioned this thing called, "Hey, there's a crisis pregnancy center open near you. You ought to go check it out." So I did that, and my heart was captured, right, for this work, helping women not to need abortions. And that's where I found myself as a part of a pregnancy help organization in South Florida. And that led really, I didn't know that 30 some years ago, but I would be doing that to this day. And so that's been my privilege and opportunity to really work in that alternatives to abortion aspect.
so how is your experience then on the ground? I mean, it sounds like you started off jumping right in, right on the front lines. You're now, not that you're not on the front lines anymore personally, I'm sure you are, but you're also in the thick of strategy and organizational leadership. So what was that change like?
Well, it goes, the path that I went on was really from, working in that local area, but then suddenly having an opportunity to be at Heartbeat International, which I did coming out of the center. I went from being a board member to being a staff member to being the executive director of a pregnancy center over a number of years. And then the opportunity came to come to Heartbeat International. So I was able to do that. And suddenly I found myself on a national and even international opportunity. And so the adventures suddenly expanded, and you start to see things that are different. You have different parts of the country, which now, 25 years ago, that was somewhat interesting to learn. But now we really see it very starkly in the wake of Dobbs, as we have abortion states and life states, and the personas have been there for a long time. But now we get the reality of that, thanks to the good work of folks that have been working on the legal and legislative side, like AUL, and it's been great to kind of watch that, and also then at the same time challenging to watch really how much darkness there is in those abortion state politics, what that means. Some of the things that have come out of that have been seeing more of the aggressive approach to pregnancy centers, which ought not have
Right.
happened, and ought not, it really is useless. We're not going anywhere. Hey, we stare in the face of death every day, watching women make life and death decisions. So, some vandalism here and there is going to persuade us. It's just going to steel us for what needs to happen, because how those women get served is too important not to do.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a moment, the attacks on PRCs in particular since Dobbs. But I'm curious, let's talk a little bit about Heartbeat in particular. Mention in the introduction your work domestically, but also globally. Can you describe for us, for folks who aren't familiar with Heartbeat, what makes Heartbeat so unique amongst all the players in this space?
Well, well, one is that we are really connected to a number of those players across the spectrum. Well, Heartbeat really was called into existence back in 1971. It really was part of that early fledgling pro-life movement, that alternatives to abortion movement that was happening. We were really called into existence by the pregnancy help movement of that day, and have continued since then. So just like the marches in the 51st year, we're now, we started actually before Roe. So we're actually now in our
Right.
53rd year. So and it really, because it was called to be from the pregnancy help movement, we were called to serve the pregnancy help movement, and that is wherever it is happening and wherever it's needed. Now, the neat thing is that that was the beginning of the growth of the pregnancy center. That is a method of service that had really started. Actually, Canada was the first pregnancy center ever, Toronto in
Oh,
1968,
I didn't know
and
that.
then
Wow.
then you had several centers opening up in Ohio and New York and other places. Of course, we saw the abortion laws changing in our country, and so more and more people began to move to this. But then quickly, it went from being, we were at that time not Heartbeat International, but called Alternatives to Abortion. And then quickly, we became Alternatives to Abortion International, helped inspire and spawn the network in Australia, worked in Europe, worked in England. I've been involved with a lot of folks to where now we know this need, and we continue to connect with those who are doing it and helping those who are feeling called to do it. And we now have affiliate locations in more than 90 countries around the globe.
What would you say, if you had to pick, this can either be since the reversal of Roe or just, if you want to look back over the past year, what would you say one of your biggest victories has been at Heartbeat?
Well, for us, one of our biggest victories has been Abortion Pill Rescue Network, right? This idea that I frankly was kind of caught off guard. I knew that we knew that chemical abortion, the RU46, had been approved in the last waning days of the Clinton administration,
Right.
had kind of been shoved on us, and we knew that it was going on. I frankly didn't know how much it was really becoming part of the landscape of really abortion across our country. But we saw it when we took over the Abortion Pill Rescue Network in 2018, and have been able to connect it to our option line, be able to manage it both nationally and internationally. And so we're grateful to do that, but suddenly saw that the need was not just growing, it was growing exponentially. And as we see now, by our calculations, nearly we think it could be as close to 80% of all abortions today in our country are being done through chemical abortion. It's cheaper, it's easier to access, it can be mailed, it can be delivered. The folks at the delivery services are trying to get things to us quickly, which means that she doesn't necessarily have to go for an abortion appointment. She can have that delivered right to her doorstep. And that has created more people who then are regretting that decision. And that's the power of abortion pill reversal and the need for it. So that's one of the big victories that we've seen, is that just as the Bible talks about where sin abounds, grace abounds. We feel like the
Mm.
grace of abortion pill reversal is something that God has provided, allowed us the privilege to do, and we continue to do that in spite some big challenges.
Yeah, right. And this is an area, we're going to get into again the attacks on PRCs more in a moment, but this is an area where there's huge attacks on the idea of abortion pill reversal, the idea that it can work, just on the most basic level. But this is coming, frankly, from some of the same people. I know I saw Jill Filipovic on X the other day talking about how when pro-lifers say that there's an actual baby, a fetus, like literally a child in miniature in the womb prior to 6 weeks. Well, they're just lying to you. I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, you can go look up her account on Twitter and see this. And she says all it is just some sort of amniotic sac, sort of a fluid, but there's no baby there at 6 weeks. And so the same people who are telling us these kinds of things, saying that we're trafficking in misinformation when we show what a human being looks like at 6 weeks who's been miscarried, for instance, or aborted, they're the same people who would deny the efficacy of something like abortion pill reversal. But it just makes sense on a very basic level, right? You don't need advanced degrees in biochemistry or science or any of the stuff to understand, that if you go and try to replace through abortion pill reversal some of the hormones that have been deprived of the child because of the abortion pills, mifepristone and misoprostol, of course, logically, wouldn't that have some impact on the pregnancy?
Well, the answer is yes, of course it does, and we know that that's happened. It's more than 4,500 times that women have made that choice, and we've seen them have the privilege and opportunity to rescue their own baby, right? That last chance to choose life. It's just progesterone. We have actual T-shirts that say it's just progesterone. You know, they like to cook up this idea that abortion pill reversal is got cooked up in the laboratory by some crazy people. Like, no, it
Right.
actually gets developed in the woman's own body to sustain her
Yeah.
pregnancy. It's the mifepristone, it's the abortion pill that was cooked up in the laboratory, really designed to suppress progesterone to kind of outcompete it for its purpose. And so all we do is we give her the opportunity to introduce kind of a flood the zone with progesterone so that it can outcompete the mifepristone, which is really the foreign substance that's been introduced to starve the baby of the nutrients that it needs. And so, of course,
Right.
this is a time-tested, proven thing. The other side wants to say that there's no science to prove this. Actually, they have no science to prove it doesn't work. They have some allegations and headlines that they also crafted carefully for their narrative and for their messaging. But again, it's just we're simply using the tools that have been provided so that we can um,
Yeah.
give her that last chance. It's eventually they're going to have to come to the understanding that science proves that this is accurate and effective.
No, there's no question, right? I mean, progesterone is given as just a part of a standard of care for many pregnant women. We don't need to talk about women who've gone and taken abortion pills or considering abortion or any of that. It's just a standard of care in medicine for many pregnancies. And so you're right. We need to talk about that more and talk about the good work. I'm curious, in light of the changes that we've seen just over the past few years with Dobbs and with Roe, you mentioned now how great a percentage abortion pills are playing nationally in terms of those who are obtaining them. Not as many people are going into what many might imagine classically walking into a physical like Planned Parenthood or other kind of third party abortion facility. How has that changed, your work at Heartbeat, but kind of the PRC movement in general? Because traditionally, right, so much of the witness and the service happened out there on the sidewalk.
Yeah, the sidewalk and then in the centers, right? In the past, she's had to go somewhere to complete her abortion. She's had to schedule an appointment. She's had to travel somewhere to be with a doctor because that's how surgical abortions are done. And even up until recently, up until the Biden administration, FDA changed the requirements, the protections really for women, then there less of that is happening. And what ultimately, Tom, that's doing is it's shrinking the window of intervention. And that exactly feeds the abortion industry. They want her to make that impulse decision. They don't want her really to step back and examine what she wants. They just want to move her more quickly to, frankly, what is a profit center for them, the purchase of that abortion, whether the state is paying for it or she's paying for it. They want her to
Mm,
move as quickly to that process as possible. You know, this is putting the lie to the fact that they really are pro-choice. They really are pro-abortion, and they want her to choose that because that's what benefits the abortion industry. So that's why they continue to lower any friction that would have for her to make that decision, including her own qualms about doing that. They're really pressing this. They're telling her she can't do this. She has to have an abortion. Like, that's not really even pro woman, much less pro choice.
right. It's that idea that, yeah, once you've made the first step or made that initial decision, you can't reverse it. It's sort of like being told, I think I'm going to go in for a knee replacement. And you show up that day for the replacement. You say, you know what? Actually, I think maybe not. And it's as if the doctor says, no, we've got to strap you in. We've got to go forward with this. You signed on the dotted line. You made the commitment. The insurance company's expecting this. It's so messed up for that reason. But let's talk about the state of the PRCs now and some of the attacks that all of you have been facing from the Biden administration. We've talked about this at Americans United for Life at a broad level. Although the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, many people think that the Supreme Court is the only part of our government that decides what the Constitution means. They buy into this idea of judicial supremacy, right? Once SCOTUS decides, it's done. But that's not the case. In the American system, we have three branches of government. And although some justices and judges would like to think they're the only ones that get a say, actually, Congress gets to interpret the Constitution just as much as the executive branch. The president gets to determine what the Constitution means. And we see this has played out in a lot of different ways in our history. Famously, Abraham Lincoln had to make a lot of constitutional decisions himself. Most infamously, right, with the suspending of habeas corpus, but in all sorts of ways to understand what the Constitution would mean in his time, in a time of civil war. But presidents do this all the time. Congress does it all the time. And so the three working together decide what the Constitution means. And there's basically, for lack of a better word, ongoing litigation about how to navigate these constitutional issues around the human right to life. So while Roe has been reversed, while it was reversed in Dobbs, the executive branch with President Biden is sort of still asserting, well, you may think that's what the Constitution means, that there's not a right to abortion, but we're going to do everything we can through our executive branch powers, through the White House, and through all the departments and agencies we control, Health and Human Services and so forth, Justice Department, to make it as if Dobbs never happened, to make it as if Roe never went away. And so that's kind of the background for what's happening. But what in particular is Biden and are his people doing to target PRCs?
We've seen a number of things, not the least of which is the more that they do to effectively help sell abortions, right? So now there's a .gov referral that you can find an abortion doctor near you, right? That's our own government, the Biden administration, putting us effectively in the abortion industry. They've been doing that one way or the other. We know that that the abortion industry has been subsidized to the tune of, what is it? 2/3 of $1 billion, right? So that's an uneven
Yeah,
playing field right there. It's like if pregnancy centers only had a portion of that, we could at least compete with that woman to make sure that that abortion is not what she wants, and what really is best for her. And ultimately, that's where we've seen many things happening where women say that, I wouldn't have done this if other things had been possible. And that's where we want to introduce those. And yet at every turn, it seems like the Biden administration, through its agencies, and most recently HHS, has threatened TANF dollars, reclassifying that so that they can't be used by pregnancy centers. That does not feel at all like an administration trying to help women. That only feels like
right.
it's an administration trying to do something for its abortion buddies and its political power. But if this administration, or frankly any administration, is really honest with themselves, we need to do things that help women not need abortions, right? It used to be said, even by Clinton himself, that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Well, now, frankly, none of those words are applying to the Biden administration. They don't.
Yeah.
They're removing safety protocols. They're trying to bend the legalities to be able to accommodate us on military bases and other places for help women, military women travel. Like they're doing all kinds of things that are bending the rules. And for sure, it's not rare because the numbers are now going up after a 30-year decline, nearly 30 years of declining abortion numbers. The abortion numbers are now not just flattening out, but now they're increasing. And we don't know all of that because we can't even count those precisely anymore because the FDA has lowered the ways to report those. These are not things that are done by an administration or a political group that cares for women and wants to see the best for women.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, meanwhile, we saw many PRCs, facilities attacked across the country, especially in the wake of the Dobbs decision. But those have been continuing, the pressure campaigns against them, the idea that, even that they're engaged in malpractice, that's a pretty hefty legal charge, that hasn't been tested in court. I think there's a reason those cases actually aren't moving from the stage of kind of heated rhetoric to actual legal contestation because they wouldn't be able to win. Do you think that the average work of the average PRC is likely to get better anytime soon, or are we going to continue to face these headwinds?
Well, it's one of the things when we start looking at what are the states doing, right? That's one of the big things that Dobbs accomplished. Apart from like breaking the shackles of Roe, that really kind of bound every single of the 50 states, to
Right.
that abortion culture. They at least unleashed the ability for the states that are inclined to be pro-life to do more to help women, to do more to help pregnancy centers. Unfortunately, the other thing has also happened where you have states that have said, well, what more can we do to protect and promote the abortion industry? And unfortunately, they've made some terrible decisions. Pennsylvania, Minnesota
Yeah.
had programs they were providing for women to be able to make sure that they had alternatives to abortion, that abortion wasn't something they felt forced or coerced into. Well, those abortion states, particularly Minnesota and Pennsylvania and others, have looked at like cutting anything and everything that's happened. And what ultimately that has done is really hurt the local pregnancy center that was counting on those funds so that they could really be that safe harbor for women, so that they could show them that, look, you don't necessarily need abortion. It's not something that you have to do. Here's the ways that we can help. We as a culture, we as a community, and certainly we as an outreach and a mission to help them directly. Whether that's through the things that are available from the local government or the municipal government. These are all things that they can do. And as the life states are doing more, we saw what Texas increased their funding to $100 million.
That's right.
The life states are moving to make this a better situation so that women don't feel that pressure. Unfortunately, a significant portion of our country is moving in the exact opposite direction, really also believing that the best thing for this woman is abortion. And in that way, they're pressing not just their ideology and their agenda, but they're really pressing something that women don't really want.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, no one, if it were put in honest terms, no one would take the deal that says, "Hey, you can have whatever the future you want. You can have this abstraction that you can fill with anything, but the cost is a dead baby. Do you want to take the deal?
Hmm.
Oh, and it's your dead baby, by the way."
Yeah.
No, they've got to obfuscate. They've got to obfuscate because whenever it's put in plain terms, the deal is untenable. And you're right. In states like Pennsylvania, where I hail from, very proud for a long time that Pennsylvania, under a Democratic governor,
Hmm.
Robert P. Casey, in the early '90s, put in place that program that you mentioned. That unfortunately, the current Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro, just recently cut. It's $134 million in state funding that was going to alternatives to abortion programs across the state. It was a
Hmm.
great pioneer in the country when they did that in the '90s, and it was a testament to an earlier era of bipartisanship when this issue was still bipartisan. Um, Unfortunately, it's not today. Hopefully, frankly, we need it to become bipartisan again. So that's a continued area for prayer and for advocacy. But I think too, on the practical level, there's so much that must be done. Just as we're having this conversation, there are headlines in Politico and elsewhere today about the efforts in Congress to perpetuate the child tax credit, the changes that were put in place over the past few years to expand that, to eliminate some bad aspects of the program that made it a little bit exclusionary, to make sure more people can benefit from it. That's a no-brainer. Then there are other programs like last year at the March for Life, Americans United for Life proposed a program called Make Birth Free, and we said, look, about half of all births in the United States already are free through Medicare, through Medicaid, through VA, through other programs, primarily through Medicaid. But we said if we're already paying for births in almost half of the instances they're happening, why not make that a default? I mean, what kind of what better pro-life victory could you have than saying that birth now costs less in America than abortion does? Even with all the state support that's being given unjustly to the abortion cause, we think that would totally not just level the playing field, but actually put federal policy, put American policy back in favor of life, making life a default. And so these kind of conversations, I think, are crucial to not just offset the bad movements that are happening in states from folks like Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, but to really drive things forward to make sure that what, as you mentioned, Texas has done in expanding their alternatives funding under Governor Abbott, or Florida has a similar program under Governor DeSantis that they did, that this can also become a sort of a national policy. And so there's so much to do in this post-Dobbs era. But Jor-El, I'm curious, what have you seen change the most that we haven't talked about since the Dobbs decision? Has anything changed for you guys at Heartbeat at kind of the big strategic level in terms of either, we would do a little SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, opportunities, threats, weaknesses.
Yeah, well, the good news is the Lord's been at work building this network of pregnancy help across the United States. We find that per capita, for every 500,000 people, there are 4 pregnancy centers in the U.S. Now, some states are less, and some states are more, and that's a good thing. It's actually the best that is in the globe. You know, the closest outside of the U.S., there's a quite a presence in Italy, but even its number would be like 1.8, right? So we have this great benefit of a pregnancy help network that's happening. This challenge, though, of the different states has really been the big thing that's come on. So that's a weakness as far as being more coordinated and collaborative. More coalitions have risen amongst the states because now they're talking to their state representatives, and that's a good thing. Those are good developments because as we agree that hey, we are the United States, right, of America,
Right.
and as we are states working on this, we can have good decisions. And you call out several good examples of a state saying, yes, we can do this and we should do more. Now, we should also be able to do more in the abortion states, and that's where those states are doing the same thing. So those are some of the difficult things. We do have to get more focused on reaching her where she's at. This goes back to this is kind of the weakness of the movement is we're very much built on a relational model, very much built on ministering to her, helping her know that she can do this. That's the number one thing that we traffic in is really what God already knows is that she can do this. Now there are different ways that she can do it. You know, there's certainly she can parent, she can place for adoption, she can do. There are different paths forward for her. Helping her know that in a culture, particularly culture that's pressing her to abort, is very difficult. It's increasingly difficult. And talking about one of the threats really has been big tech. Big tech has weighed in
Mm,
against us and frankly censored abortion pill reversal advertising. We saw recently was a Capitol Hill pregnancy center right there in D.C. was suddenly not
right.
on the Google map. Right, that was apparently that was a mistake or something that was had to be addressed as
Always a
often
mistake.
as
Yeah.
often told to us. It was an error, whatever. But it's just convenient that it happens pretty consistently to the pro-life folks than and almost never to our knowledge to the abortion folks. Right there a lot of things are going on the big tech side. That's particularly difficult to overcome, given current situation. So we have to do better about that. We want to compete for her heart and her mind with the abortion industry. We don't want her to feel forced or coerced into that decision, which they benefit from. We don't. We don't benefit from her decision in any way, shape, or form. But we definitely want to be there to help her to choose life. And so these are some of the big things that we're wrestling with. We appreciate those state legislatures that are looking diligently for ways to help in that process, but we're also kind of challenged by those that are looking to support the abortion industry more than they are supporting the women.
Yeah, so I'm curious, one of the things that you mentioned was the efforts by the Biden administration to really enshrine this through the kind of new .gov approach and making, sort of it seems like they're trying to build kind of a version of Heartbeat, except in reverse. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm curious at that level, you may have seen last year there was some congressional legislation to take what had existed for a long time, which is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, but to simplify it and to take it from like an 800 number and to make it kind of like a 911 number. And they made it a 988 number. And so you can dial 988 now if you're having suicidal thoughts or ideation or whatever, and you need counseling or options, which I think makes sense, is great. I'm curious, I can see both positives and negatives to it, but is there value in a future administration, a pro-life administration, trying to do something similar, like built around what Heartbeat's done, for instance, and have one of those like 3-digit numbers that could be a national resource for people to get pro-life options?
Well, anything that gets a woman access to that kind of information faster, I would applaud. Obviously, there are some
Yeah.
details that would have to be make sure we iron out, but essentially we've been doing that. To have the government saying, yes, you can do this and continue this mission of helping women to choose life, we would be delighted for such efforts. Um, Now, having said that, getting the government involved is, its own adventure, as we learned from Reagan, right? The
Right.
the nine scariest words. Hi, I'm here from the government. I'm from the government. I'm here to help you, right?
Right.
There's always that kind of tension. Like, could we do this? But frankly, we've had optionline.org has been answering these types of calls as a national call line since 2003, right? We started this. In fact,
Mm,
it's about to turn 21 here on the 21st of January. It's We're excited for Option Line. And Option Lines really received more than 5 million contacts over that time. We've been able to direct people to pregnancy help all over the country and around the globe, in fact. So that's already happening. Would we benefit by an administration taking this as seriously as they do suicide? Yes, because that's exactly what's happening. Life is in the balance, and we want to do everything we can to step in and help them, because every woman should be loved and supported in her pregnancy. That should be something
yeah.
we can all agree on, regarding what administration is in power.
Yeah. And I'm curious, we're starting to come to a close, but, so often what is lost in the conversation is the role, both for better and worse, of the larger family, the father, of course, of the child, but also the family writ large and the wider community. You mentioned the really inherently relational nature of Heartbeat. How do you go about conveying to people the positive role of the wider family, and how do you go about maybe discouraging so much of the coercive and threatening nature that many women encounter from family who want them to abort and who are pressuring them to abort and who are telling them that basically if they want to stay in the family they've got to abort this child.
Yeah, those are certainly difficult challenges that she faces. One of the ways that we step into that is, we have a kind of a counseling framework that we use, and it's called LOVE, right? Which is love. And the first thing we do is we listen and we learn. We listen to her, and we learn who she is, what really is driving her. And the good news is, Tom, is that still in our country, in our culture, is this value for family. It's a question of timing, even marriage. And as much as it's in the news and constantly kind of put down, there still is this dream and value for marriage. Now it's eroded, and
Yeah.
it's not in the right trajectory, but it's still there, deep in her heart, deep in really where God is calling her to. So we listen and learn. We open the options. Like, so, if the first thing is that she's really looking at one option, and when you only have one option, you don't really have options, right? So that's what the other side is driving. So we want to give her that moment to pause and step back and open those options. And then the V step is really to give her and to explore vision and values. What is her vision for her life? What are her values? That's where we can draw out those things that are really part of her, but she can't see in the moment because of the turmoil that's surrounding her situation. And then we extend and empower. And that's really where we get to the point that you're talking about, is help her understand that there is a network. There are those that are around her. There are these values for family that can work, even her own family, which might not seem like they're involved. It's exceptionally rare. It does happen. It's exceptionally rare that the family doesn't turn around and welcome that new child into their, and suddenly becomes
Yeah.
this thing that they were ready to get rid of. Suddenly becomes the apple of their eye, and they can't imagine life without it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard not just women but grandparents say that we cannot imagine life without little Tommy or little Jane. We just can't
Right.
imagine it, and that's exactly right, because that's what God saw from the beginning. That's what we need to speak into her life in that moment of crisis. If she can see past her circumstances and realize that there is a lot work going for her, including her family around her, and call her to that kind of thing that's already inside her, then we will see great success as she chooses life.
Well, Jor-El, we mentioned at the very outset the March for Life. This year is the 51st March. They started right after Roe v. Wade was handed down. Americans United for Life and Heartbeat International are both just a bit older, founded the same year, so turning
Yes.
53 this year. We've been in the work for a long time together, all three of us. What do you see, as you're going out there? I assume, are you going to be out at the march this Friday?
You bet. Of course, I'm about to get on a plane here in a couple of hours. There's always
All right.
other things going on besides the march. On Friday, there's all kinds of things happening leading up to that.
I know, and it's expanded so much in recent years. Not just the official march activities and all, of course, their state marches they're doing now in different state capitals, but even I know there's the West Coast March and all sorts of good things. There's good competition. But I'm curious for you, what is it like over the years, having been to so many marches, and we'll be out there together on Friday. People will be receiving this conversation on Friday, listening in if they can't be at the march. They want to get engaged. What do you think, is the thing you see that's changed the most, or also stayed the most the same about the march over all these
Well,
years?
to me, I wish every person would experience the March for Life in DC at least once, right? And here's why,
Yeah,
is because there is tremendous energy that's there. I know in the midst of it, we certainly leading up to the demise of Roe, there was a sense of like we're mourning that Roe exists, that we're bound to this, and so now we feel that release, and we felt that energy too last year. But there's so many young people that are out there. There's so many families that come out
it's true.
that really the March for Life is a there's an undercurrent of joy for life, and that's really the power that you can't experience just watching it. I get home, watch it on C-SPAN or any of the coverage but being in the midst of it, it's got this energy and excitement, and I believe it's because it is really celebrating life. And Jeannie and the team at March for Life have done a great job about kind of highlighting and capitalizing on that, and I trust that that's happening in every state. It happened here in Ohio when we did our march back in October, and that same energy, that same excitement for life. And that's really what we ought to do when we encounter life. We should celebrate life and then, of course, champion life at every opportunity.
100%. So, Jor-El, just as we close here, how can people best support Heartbeat? What are all the ways?
Well, two things. One that I would say is, hey, make sure you know optionline.org, because if you encounter someone, our spheres of influence have whether it's our own family, our neighbors, people we go to church with, people we know at work, optionline.org. If someone is encountering a pregnancy distress situation where they're not sure what they're going to do, please know optionline.org. You can find the center that's closest to you, where you can call us or chat with our team that's available 24/7, 365. And if you want to know more about Heartbeat International, then that's easy, heartbeatinternational.org. Happy to connect and help. If you have that vision for the nation or international work, there's lots to be done, lots more to do to champion life.
Absolutely. Well, Jor-El, we're going to keep pulling for you, and you keep pulling for us, and together we'll reach that day where all are welcomed throughout life and protected in law. Thanks so much for
Amen.
talking with
Thank
us
you so
today.
much, Tom. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Be well.